Ballot item number 14, Order M137, second reading of Bill 137, an act to amend the Children's Law Reform Act, the Vital Statistics Act, and other acts with respect to parental recognition. Ms. DiNovo.
The member for Parkdale High Park.
I move second reading of Bill 137, an act to amend the Children's Law Reform Act, the Vital Statistics Act, and other acts with respect to parental recognition.
Ms. DiNovo has moved second reading of Bill 137, an act to amend the Children's Law Reform Act, the Vital Statistics Act, and other acts with respect to parental recognition. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the member has 12 minutes for a presentation. The member for Parkdale High Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an absolute honour. It seems to be the afternoon of the child here at Queen's Park, and it's fitting. It's fitting because we're moving really into the season where we celebrate children, whether they're spinning dreidels or whether they're opening presents under Christmas trees. This is the season for children. And it's also, quite frankly, people know here that I'm a United Church minister by trade, and in the Christian tradition, of course, it's the season where we celebrate a birth. We celebrate the birth of a particular baby. This bill, Cy and Ruby's Law, is about babies. It's about the joy of babies, that we love them, that we celebrate them, and that we celebrate them no matter to what family they're born. So whether they're born to a same-sex family, whether they're born with 3 parents involved, whether they're born to a man and a woman, we are celebrating those children, and those children should have equal rights, as should their parents. And in fact, it is the day for human rights. It is the United Nations International Day of Human Rights. So that's another great reason that December 10th be the day that we pass Cy and Ruby's Law. This is one of those no-brainer bills, and I have to say that up front because, first of all, just about every other province in Canada already has in their law a law that covers same-sex and LGBTQ folks at birth. We don't, Madam Speaker, and that is a bizarre oversight. It's not only a bizarre oversight, it's in contradiction to our Charter of Rights. It's certainly in contradiction to our Human Rights Code that talks about both trans rights now with Toby's Act having passed and also, of course, sexual preference. I want to give some thanks to some folk. Joanna Radbourne is here. She's a lawyer who really has spearheaded most of the research on this. Kirsty Mathers-McHenry's here. I'm going to tell her story a bit. And she is one of the mothers of Cy and Ruby. Ruby is here today, Princess Ruby, by the way, it says on her name tag. Cy is a little bit too, he's at the squirming age, so Cy isn't here, but he's here in spirit. And we also shortly will have many more folk. They're all just moving into the gallery over here as well. I'm going to rattle off some of their names. We've got Lisa, Ashley, Cassandra, Julia, Emery, Devon, Amanda, Lil. We've got Henry, Nathaniel, Alida, Caroline, Rob, Kelly, Elizabeth, Jared, Joanna, Davina, Ian, Laura, Linda, and again, I've already introduced some of Joanna and McHenry Mathers as well. Let me start by telling, yes, we will have some babies here, Madam Speaker. Let me start by telling Kirsty's story because I think this gets to the heart of it and I think speaks to what we all who are parents have experienced. Kirsty Mathers McHenry's wife was in labour. Kirsty, mother of Cy and Ruby. And the unthinkable happened. There were complications, and the doctors warned Kirsty that there was a chance that her wife could die. At that moment, holding her newborn baby, she watched doctors frantically try to save her wife's life. It also dawned on her at that moment that she might be raising the child as a single parent. If that nightmare wasn't horrifying enough, Kirsty also realized she would not be a legal parent to her own child. And I'm going to quote her. She said, "As I held my wife's hand and snuck glances at the 2 rolls of paper unspooling and recording the 2 heartbeats, I went through all the possibilities. If my wife died, I might not be able to leave the hospital with our baby. Who would be able to? My in-laws, they were supportive. Maybe the hospital would let the baby leave with them. Our sperm donor, he was known to us, was another possibility. Maybe he could pretend to be more than a donor uncle for a morning and get us home, unquote. She goes on to say, it ended okay. My wife was okay. Our daughter was okay, and we left the hospital together after visits from family. Months later, we obtained a court date, and the three of us, with our lawyer, went to court to make me a legal mummy. Now, who among us would want to go through an experience like that, then have to pay a lawyer some $2,000 or so, and then go to court to adopt our own children? This is the case in Ontario. And so this is what Cy Ruby's Act would change. It would make sure that lesbian co-mothers who use donor sperm would be able to include both mothers' particulars on the child's birth registration form. They can't do that now. The Act would also allow for the recognition of an additional parent, such as a known sperm donor, if the parents agree. Or if it's two men, the birth mother, the woman that's carried the actual child. Research suggests about half of lesbian couples choose a known sperm donor. The current law forces same-sex couples to, as I said, adopt their own children, jump through hurdles for legal recognition. This is also trans-positive. The Act removes all gendered language from birth registration forms. Trans men who give birth will no longer be forced to identify as mother, which is discriminatory according to our Human Rights Code, and denies, of course, their lived reality. And this will allow families with more than two parents to register the birth of their child and to be immediately and equally recognized. There will no longer be a distinction between the person who gives birth and the child's other parents. Now, the courts have already weighed in on this. In 2006, the Rutherford case, Justice Rivard found the Ontario birth registration scheme to be discriminatory because it excluded non-biological lesbian co-mothers. It's almost 10 years later, and the government has not cured its discriminatory scheme so as to better recognize assisted reproduction and the equality rights of LGBTQ parents. In 2007, the Court of Appeal for Ontario ruled that there is a legislative gap in the scheme for parental recognition. It may be, they said, in a child's best interest to recognize more than two parents. So really what we're asking here is to end this fight and end potential fights that are upcoming. There will be many charter challenges if this bill is not passed. And by passed, I don't mean just second reading, but I mean passed into law. I met with the Attorney General yesterday, Madame Meilleur, very supportive and very supportive in terms of trying to make this law as quickly as possible to preclude that possibility, so that more parents have to go to court to both adopt their children and also to challenge the Ontario government. Taxpayers' dollars badly not at work in defending what should be a no-brainer. Let me tell you another story. This is Raquel and Deanna's story. Looking for it, yeah. So here's her words, Raquel. A short while after Thora entered the world, it became obvious that Deanna was hemorrhaging badly, and her body was not responding to the care the midwives were giving her. The midwives transferred Deanna's care to the surgical team. And she goes on to speak about, I'm running out of time, she goes on to speak about a very similar story to Kirsty's, where her wife in distress didn't know whether she'd be able to leave the hospital with the baby. And again, a possible tragedy which could have been made worse by our discriminatory laws here. I want to finish with my own story because I think the personal is political. My partner of 17 years, we're a blended family. My children are not his children. The only child in a Portuguese Roman Catholic family, I have to tell you. And he was the known sperm donor to two of our best friends, who are lesbian mothers in Ottawa. And I want to give a shout out to them, Caitlin and Jody Fisher. And to our two daughters, Harriet and Stella, who are now 13 and 10, who are conceived by my partner and those two mothers. And I want to tell you that the fear that everyone went through about possible challenges to their parenting at that time, we made it. We went the lawyer route. We had it all drawn up. And I have to tell you, this is the new Canadian family, folks, because this Christmas, those children, Stella and Harriet, that are our children, by extension, in our new real Canadian family, will be visiting their grandparents at Christmas time, as they have every Christmas since they were about 2 years old, and are loved and welcomed as the only biological grandchildren my partner's parents will ever have. So, quite frankly, if we can work it out, this government can work it out. If we in our family can love our children the way we do, this government can love all of our children the way they should be loved. That's really what we're asking here. That's really what we're looking for here, is to make that love recognized in law so that we don't force parents to go through the hurdles that they need to go through, and so that Cy and Ruby don't have to, and all the Cys and Rubies in the future, all the Gabies in the future, don't have to go through what they had to go through and what our children in Ottawa had to go through as well. So I'm going to leave some time. I'm sure I've left lots out. The Premier has weighed in on this. The Premier has supported this. Thank you, Premier. The Attorney General supports this. Thank you, Attorney General. Really, this is a situation that needs to happen. It needs to happen post-second reading. It needs to happen quickly. Again, we have two choices here, and really they're Christmas and they're Hanukkah and their Festival of Lights and Kwanzaa choices. They're choices for children or against children, for equal rights for all babies and all families, or discriminatory laws that see some babies as more legitimate than other babies and some families as more legitimate than other families. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.